many people misunderstand is that it's free and it's open.
They are actually using open source daily, they're just not aware of it.
It's estimated that if you didn't have open source, you would need 3.5 more resources to develop software.
It's quite easy to create an open source package, right? But it's really hard to maintain it.
Hi, my name is Marcin Kokot and welcome in Product Odyssey, the series where we explore how to build products fundamentally better. Today we have a pleasure to have a guest with us, Jan Dvorak. Jan is the open source community leader. He's known to be a Meteor ambassador. He's also an entrepreneur. He has just started up the company named Literary Universe, which we'll be probably talking about it in the episode. He's also the co-host of the Meteor News podcast that you will find out all the details in the show notes of today's episode. So Jan, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And today with us is also Maciej.
Yeah, it's me again.
And today's episode we'll be talking about open source, how to approach open source as a CEO or CTO, what are the risks, what are the benefits, what are some stories under the hood of the recent risks or security breaks? And we'll be talking about some hints for everybody how to actually apply good rules for using open source in your projects. So let's jump right into it. Open source is becoming more and more popular. 94 million of developers contributing on the GitHub. Assume 90% of the companies using open source is becoming more and more popular, also with the topic of AI. Why do you think it's so popular and why is it on the wave right now?
I think I wouldn't say it's more popular than ever, at least in the developer community. Over the years, it has become more easier to get in, and it has also become, I would say, more public knowledge that this thing exists. And of course, with that comes, more attention, more people coming in. GitHub, I think, especially had a very positive impact on increasing the popularity of open source, in particular because it made it much more easier, and that's based on Git, and then GitHub made it. It's more like a social network in essence. I go there every day, look at what notification, what are people talking about, what are the new bugs, what are the new pull requests. So at least for me, it made it more fun and interesting. It also made it more easier to get started, and also people who don't have any technical knowledge to jump in and be part of the community. So that has been a big driver. And of course, another one is the big adoption in, companies. And with that comes, more processes, more spotlight. And also with the more spotlight comes issues and security and all those other things.
Right. Just to cover like the basis here, any kind of recent examples of success stories around the open source solutions that we can present here?
There is so many, I would say, that it's kind of sometimes hard to choose to or even like realize that, this is actually open source. If we go through history, probably the biggest success and ongoing success is Linux or GNU plus Linux for those people out there that like to go that way. That Linux right now pretty much powers the World Wide Web. There are like other things, with Microsoft, but it doesn't even come close to compare what Linux has. We have a lot of alternatives like LibreOffice, which is, I would say, on the rise recently, or a few years back. In Germany, it was decided that they are going to go to that. Very interesting story as well. And from my neck of wood, Rocket Chat would be an example. That's you could say a Slack alternative based on Meteor. So that one is also growing, and you see more and more open source companies coming out, and then we have, of course, all the technologies like React, Vue, Svelte, and so on that come in. For the last one to mention here, kind of again from the Facebook, the dev shop, could be GraphQL, which then was, that's just itself is a standard and kind of description of what it should do, and then other companies took it and built products on top of it, like Apollo GraphQL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this is the point. So like there are some popular open source solutions, popular open source products. So you mentioned like Linux. There is also like, I don't know, Android and LibreOffice or other products that are like household names. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, because most of the open source is not actually focusing on delivering final products like the Linux distros or the products that we mentioned, but rather they're focusing on building the building blocks that other can use to deliver their products, either open source or some proprietary solutions, but depending heavily on the open source. So even if like a typical person is not aware that their open source is all around them, because they're not using open source solutions, open source products daily, they are actually using open source daily. They're just not aware of it.
Right. It seems that you cannot hide from open source, right? It's everywhere. As this kind of like funny statements or memes that you can find that every solution around the world is probably relying on this one package done by the developer in Nebraska. Any kind of maybe stating the obvious, what are the benefits of actually using open source solutions, either the platforms or basically the libraries and the dev tools?
Where to start? The first thing is that, of course, and many people misunderstand, is that it's free and it's open. So you have the insight into what the code is. So if you don't understand something, or if something, if there's a bug, you can go in and actually, go through the code and see, what's going on, what's happening. And then, of course, you can adapt it for free, pending the license, into your product, use it. So that's kind of like the big thing that comes into it. Also, I would say also the openness can be also its weakness, but when we are still on the benefit, it is it speeds you up the company as you develop, right? Because you don't have to build an entire Vue library. You can just take React or something like that and go and start coding your application. And it's estimated that if you didn't have open source, you would need 3.5 more resources to develop software. And when I say resources, I mean money, people, and time. I think Jan Dvorak could probably tell us more about how what would you do without open source, or how would that be different?
Oh yeah, this will be really hard. So we also like thrive on open source. We also try to contribute back, and I think we'll be discussing this maybe later in the episode how to do it. But yeah, that's true. So we would never like try to calculate whether this is 3.5 times or what is the number, but for sure. We won't be as effective as a company in delivering products if not open source, right? So we are heavily based on it, and it's not only us. It's like almost everyone is doing this, right? Because there are lots of benefits to doing so. So it's you're not reinventing the wheel, right? So you don't have to think about all of those solutions that already someone thought about earlier, and you can just reuse them and build on top of it and contribute back if you can.
Yeah, I think also like the big one that's oftentimes forgotten, with specific packages, you don't have to get expert in that particular domain to get the benefits of it. So if there's like a particular project or package, say about data analysis or graphs, if you don't have open source that would do a lot of the things, you would have to get domain experts in that area that they could then do all the data analytics, or prepare for machine learning code, all that stuff. With the AI, with the open source AI, a lot of the things you can just go without having in-depth understanding of how the algorithm works, how the AI works, and you can just go in and describe just the basics, top level what you need, and it will then go and a lot of the other things will kind of fall in place.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point because like the standardization that open source gives you enables to solve many problems in your industry without the need of domain experts, like you mentioned, but like platform experts, the people knowing just how to contribute the general solution and then can apply them in many different cases, many different domains. This is also something that open source enables. Yeah, this is a great point.
Yeah, I remember one of the benefits of which is not obvious. I remember from, I believe, discussion with the Automatic CEO, which he was mentioning the not obvious benefit of reducing the cost of coordination when you're using open source. So it's in a regular company, you would have basically a separate department that you are talking with. If you have 2 domains or 2 components, here you can reduce that because it's open source, right? Maybe something to also to think about it. Not only the speed and cost.
You still need to talk to like open source maintainers, right? So it's sometimes easier to talk to your department than to some.
Sure, but you don't need to synchronize. You don't need to basically plan the roadmap. You plan the budgets, right? It's and it's a standard, right? So you have this as it is solution, right?
Kind of want to tag on the standardization, and sometimes we like, for example, we have opinionated open source framework that tell you, okay, this is how you do this one thing. There is a lot of also people like, no, I want to do it in the other way. But at the same time, from what I've discovered, if you have a one standardized way, it allows you to, kind of be more focused. You don't have to, figure, okay, how do I do this? Which one of these 10 approaches do I use? It's like, oh, I'm just using this, and then I'm focusing on that. And also this, you could say, some might say shackling or giving you less choices, then allows you, I would say, a little bit also to be more innovative, because then you are kind of working in those constraints. And one of my interests is creative writing, and one of the big things that helps a lot is because you have unlimited imagination, you can do everything you want. But once you set a rules, then I found myself to be actually more creative and more productive, because then I have set of rules and I know what I can and cannot do, and I can then move towards my goal of telling the story. And I think the same thing applies in open source as well. And another thing then is also with the standardization is once a developer learns one technology, they can then take it and go to another company that uses it as well, and they don't have to retrain and start from scratch.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. And like you mentioned, like setting constraints increase the creativity. Also, you can translate this to software development. So even like choosing one of the open source solutions can also increase the effectiveness of your development team. So if you choose React over Angular, or Angular over React, or whatever, but basically circling into the but basically picking a single solution, set those constraints, and this basically cuts all of the discussions about how to manage state or update the view layer. One way may be better or another, or suits you better or the other, and this is fine. But not choosing any of those solutions would basically force your team to reinvent them anyway, and the chance that you will find something better than those established solutions is really slim.
Don't reinvent the wheel, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, you're not vendor locked in, right? So if you're the rare occasion that you actually can think something better than the established solutions, you can still do it or build on top of it, right? If you use some kind of proprietary layer for this, you're basically locked into what those vendor gives you and direction that they're going to, right? If the open source package is not going into direction that you like, there more likely already be some kind of fork, because probably you're not the only one thinking this way. And if not, you can be the first one, fork it, and start a new direction. So this is only like positive things.
Right. Still, it would sound like we are selling almost open source, and it's too good to be true. If we'll be talking only about benefits, any kind of risk connected with using open source solutions, any kind of recent examples?
As I already hinted, one of the biggest strengths oftentimes is also one of the biggest downsides, or can become. That's kind of how you look at history, with nations, that's how it turns out to. And the same thing I would apply to open source. It's open, so anybody can take it and do weird and crazy and dangerous things with it as well. So that goes, we will see use open source in malware and other things, but also for open source itself as well. You can have people come in and trying to infiltrate it and stick in malicious code and then publish it, under the same name, or I think best would be to take some examples. Recently, we had two, I would say, high-profile example. One is the XZ utility, which looks like it was a multi-year spy infiltration where they kind of forced the main maintainer to give one of their, let's say, spies access into the project, and it would look, oh, this guy's just helping out, but then once they got in, still everything looked above board, and they stick the malicious code into the build process.
Yeah.
So, and it got discovered because one engineer in Microsoft was kind of doing something around that and thought that this one step takes a few more milliseconds than it should have, and then went in and actually found the issue of this. It was a keylogger, so that was a big one. And another one, and that kind of touches more on the money in open source, is the story of Polyfill.io, which was bought by a Chinese company. And Polyfill.io was actually a very good service that it looked on the browser, and you put in, okay, what capabilities of the new web API do I need? So in my case, I was using it to make sure that all the browsers that come to my website have the INTL API enabled. So I send that to them, and then Polyfill would check, okay, does the browser already support this, or do I need to add the Polyfill into it to make sure that even this old browser can use that capability? And this Chinese company bought it, and then they added in pretty much also spyware, and it was like very specific, only if you go at this hour, if you are this mobile phone or not. So that kind of to try to avoid the you could say analysis of people, but of course people noticed, and now is the don't use this service because it was brought up by malicious Chinese company.
Yeah, and also a little bit in defense of open source, like coming back to the XZ problem, and all of these are very serious issues because the tool is being dependent by many popular solutions that we use daily, every one of us, to rely on our security. So this is probably a state-sponsored attack. Like you mentioned, it takes many years to actually come through. But the advantage of open source is that there could be this developer in Microsoft that can actually do the investigation and find this few milliseconds difference, right? Because if this was a closed product, there still could be some kind of infiltration, right? And maybe probably even easier to do, and we'll probably never find this out. So
that's the also common let's say attack against proprietary software, or big companies, that they include backdoors for governments and other things. The problem with including backdoors for your government is that it only takes a few hackers to find it out and exploit it for their own purposes, right. Other
So that's an open source that like everyone can find the holes, but
and it's also this I could say state sponsored attacks is a new thing, which is sadly kind of speaks of the state of our world, but it's I would say a new challenge for open source to overcome as the tensions probably will grow.
Right.
Yeah, but I think the biggest problem with open source solutions is besides the security, because this is like the common theme for all IT products, but this kind of like reliance, right? So if you're buying software from someone, you can rely on this that this will be provided for you as long as you pay for it, right? Okay, companies can fail and everything, but it's less likely to happen than if this is a product that someone starts as a hobby and continues as a hobby. This gains popularity. Now everyone is using their hobby project. They depend on it on their production setups, and this still is a hobby project, right? So if this guy decides to drops his hobby or just happens to him, whatever happens to him, goes to vacation or goes to jail, like there was this case, right? Like one of the very popular open source maintainer actually got thrown into jail for a traffic accident. And there was also a package that many of us depend on daily, and there was no one else enough familiar with it to basically continue the development, right? So this is a huge platform risk for all the products that we belong on something that we do not control. So we got this for free, and this is great. We got lots of stuff moving faster. We can do more in less time. We do this for free, but we got this for free, right? So we cannot have any expectations for doing so. And most of the open source software is provided as is. So even the worst case scenario, there is no one you can sue. So if something happens, you make some damage, and the cause is something in your supply chain that you buy, then you can basically try to sue them for the damages. But in case of open source, you're the so
this is talking about reliance, right? But is it also the same topic of left path and this famous article, like one developer destroying the internet?
Yeah, this is quite similar. So there was different reasons for it. Right, but basically, lots of us depend on some software that we are not even aware that this exists, right? Because this was not dependencies of our product, but it was a dependency of a dependency of a dependency of a dependency of our product, and so auditing open source dependencies is really, really hard.
Yeah, left path touches more on how you should use, let's say, open source responsibly, which we'll probably touch on later on. But part of this, as you mentioned, starting as a hobby project and then more people using it. The beauty of open source is, if something like that happens, there's always the option to fork it. But another thing is, of course, as project grow, more people get involved there, and it starts to, I would say, turn into organizations, potentially businesses, if there is a commercial aspect to it as well. But a lot of times, that's what happened with Linux. It became a Linux Foundation. It happens with a lot of the other projects. They turn on sort of foundation so that the governance is clear and the processes around, all the stuff from releases to, managing security issues get formalized. So it's much more easier. I think, and I would say that's probably one of the biggest changes from the early days of open source, where it was very punk and wild west, to today, where it's becoming in a way more corporate, one could say,
more standardized even, right? We're talking about the disadvantages or the risk can be around the legal part or the compliance, the security, of course, and the newest threat that we have. Or the dependency, and this one person back in Nebraska. This is something that puts a thing into your head if you're a CEO or a CTO or a startup owner that starts a business. Any kind of guidelines on how I should actually approach that securely, either when I'm in the big corp or if I'm actually starting my own company. How should I think about security of using open source?
So when you're in a big corporation, there are today actually pretty good guidelines and suggestions from the Linux Foundation. So I would highly recommend, if you are in that position of, larger company or big corporation, to really look into that. The main thing is what you will have to set up is open source office. Specifically, they call it OSPO, so open source program office, which then goes in and make sure that all the licenses are in compliance, that and synchronizes all of your procedures for open source across the organization, because especially as the company grows, as you get more offshoots and more different departments that can then start move in all kind of weird of directions. So that's the kind of big thing. The big thing there also is kind of very related to security. What's talked about is today is the supply chain security. So that you have to really look into that that you don't have any weird or strange package that could be potential security risk. And there is actually something called SBOM, funny name, but it stands for Software Bill of Material. It's an ISO standard that allows you to create this supply chain kind of list and see where is everything coming from and see if there are potential issues.
Can you extend on the supply chain risk? Any kind of example of how does it look like?
Yeah, so supply chain risk is, for example, the exe utility that some package in your, as I said, supply chain is kind of takes from the general world of supply chains. How does your stuff get from the mine or farm in Asia to the market in Europe? So looking at all the different things and what are the potential issues on the way and how to mitigate them. So and that's what the SBOM is doing as well. It looks on all your software in there. What are the potential risks? What are the legal risks? And is then helps you monitor everything that goes into that, and also allows for compliance and other legal stuff.
Any kind of tools or solutions to monitor that? I can expect that I can do it one time manually, right? But talking about the dependency of the dependency of the dependency.
There are actually tools out there that you can use. I do believe Linux Foundation or somebody around them have created it, so it becomes automated. It depends also on what language you use. So based on what programming language you use, then they have different tools to kind of manage that. Kind of not necessarily like in this supply chain security, but like in general security, there is also an organization called Tidelive, which I do believe is for Python, Java, and JavaScript primarily. The idea there is you pay a subscription, and then they take care of the packages they have under their management or kind of their support to make sure that the maintainers get support from Tidelive when there's some security issue, and that they have processes to make sure that it's addressed quickly, promptly, and you don't have to worry about security for those packages. And they're hoping to always get more on board based on what you have as well. And they have automated tools that kind of go through your package JSON or other package lists to determine what packages to use, what are the known issues. And there is even today npm itself, if you do npm audit, is going to check and see what are the known security vulnerabilities, what do you need to update, and all that stuff. So that has been improving, especially over the past, I would say, 2-3 years has really seen a tremendous improvement.
That's it seems that this will be like assessing, if I hear it correctly, right? Assessing if I'm in the state that I have developed already solution and I'm using lots of open source, I can assess the libraries, I can check the security of that and dependency. What about if I'm actually starting Andover, right? I'm starting to build a product, and developers are coming in and saying, "I want to use this library."
Maybe add to the previous topic about like auditing, like security is one part, but there are lots of legal issues that you need to take care of when you are using open source. So there is open source is not a single license that packages can use. There are lots of different licenses with different licenses types. Some of them are permissive, some of them are copyleft, some of them are not actual open source, even if they pretend to be. Some of them have even some non-typical license, right? So there are licenses like, I don't know, beerware license or WTF public license or stuff like this, which basically are quite permissive licenses. But if you are a large enterprise and your product uses a license that states, like in case of beerware, that you need to buy beer to the author of the package if you meet him in person, well, if you're a lawyer in an enterprise and you need to assess whether this is a package that you can use or not, how do you even approach this, right? So there are lots of different quirks in this regard that you need to take care of.
Yeah, there is a general kind of rule of thumb. There is websites that kind of list, okay, what's copyleft license, what's permissive license, what you can use. It's always good to consult a lawyer, but if you are starting, that's expense you probably don't want to have.
Exactly.
So, and most of the open source project these days have MIT license, and MIT license is, and its derivatives for the most part, are licenses that are considered safe for businesses to use. So that's a general rule of thumb. If it's MIT license, you are A-okay to do. If not, then look more into it.
What about the dependencies? If the library is on MIT, it doesn't mean that all the dependencies that are there are also on MIT. Probably not, right?
No.
Yeah, that's one thing you have to be more careful around. I would say, especially like if you're just a startup or anything, you just look on your direct dependency. Once you start advancing more and more, you have to start looking and digging deeper. And that's when things can go wild. And we have a lot of fun stuff about the size of node modules and all that stuff.
Yeah, so the most popular packages probably also got their dependencies sorted, but there may be dragons over there. So auditing this in a larger project is always a fun thing to do.
That really scares me, right? Because if I'm looking at this point, like I can have like OSPO office, or I can do the assessment. It seems like a tremendous effort to make sure that all the dependencies are right and correct. I believe that there should be any kind of like a fast solutions, or at least rule of thumbs, where if I'm starting a development, I can actually safely move in that direction. So what kind of like guidelines I would set for my team to follow, rather than to assess every existing library.
Yeah, I think kind of really touch on it. I think it really starts early on in your company to set rules to follow on what projects are you going to use and stuff like that. So it can start with simple. Okay, if you want to include a project, it has to have MIT license or stuff like that. In my past, I also had an issue where a project had the appropriate license, but it was not in the format that was needed for the company legal department. So all those things, but starting early startup where you have more lenience. One of the big issue there is also not to overuse, like with npm, to just have package for every little problem. This goes back to the story of leftpad, which really underline why you should be selective about your packages. In short, the story, there was a dispute between npm and the author of leftpad about another package, but the way npm kind of dealt with him, I would say justifiably. He said, okay, I'm done with you guys, take off all my packages. And one of those packages was leftpad, which was used by millions of projects. So once that disappeared from the repository, overnight, there was a total chaos because a lot of things stopped working, including React. I do remember one day, doing npm install in my Meteor application with React, and suddenly it's like error, like completely strange error, didn't make any sense. And then we discovered that there was this leftpad, which was like 8 lines of code or something like that, very very simple stuff. And that kind of comes, I think, setting the rules. You don't need a package for everything. So before you even include any package, do the analysis. Is this something tiny that maybe I can just go in, find the 8 lines of code, copy it into my utilities file, and be done with it, or should I actually include that? So I think that's a big analysis, because one of the thing is it's very tempting to go in and have package for everything, and because then you say, oh, I don't have to maintain this piece of code, other people are taking care of it,
and it's tweaked, right, to the extreme performance.
But the problem with that, sometimes, like with the small ones, not necessarily. It's just some utility function, and it was popular in the early days. Just to do it and put it out there like left path. But it's a function that should just be in your utility toolbar that you shouldn't get from elsewhere. First of all, because it's probably not going to change. That's the big one. So you don't have to get it. Then it's just for yourself, from project to project, to have like a utility file that you copy over with these things and just adjust them to your project. So that's like one big thing. But as you kind of put in, every time you put a new package, it increases the size of node modules, some etc. Because the package itself is not just the code itself. There's a lot of meta around it to make it work as a package, so that needs to be taken into account as well.
Don't look only on the line of code, but also dependencies and files attached to that.
And then of course, then you need to read all the other beside the code itself. You need to also ask, okay, is this who is behind it? How is it supported? What are the processes there? Because with larger project, you see they have they have CI, they have lint checking, they have tests, they have a big community, they have processes to make sure that everything is above the board and working as it should. While with smaller project that somebody just makes on a weekend, you have none of that. And also that, or if it's like a project that even though may be used and nobody is really supporting that, but it's used a lot, then that's also a red flag, because then, okay, this is a good prime target for malicious people to go in and take over. Or you have to then be also very, if there's normal people around it, okay, what happens if somebody if there's like a bug, or if somebody puts in malicious code, how is this going to get resolved?
How we handle this is that we have a process that every developer goes through when they want to add a package to a product, to a project. And because developers are not lawyers, we got this kind of like whitelist and blacklist of licenses that are safe to use, that are not safe to use for sure, right? So this is like all the copyleft licenses. If you work on a proprietary project, then adding some copyleft package is probably not the best idea. But there is also like a gray area in between. So there is also a list of licenses that is basically maybe, and you need to dig into, basically do like a small due diligence to ensure that this is something that you can use, and also something that this developer can pass to someone more experienced with it to do the analysis. But there is also the things that you mentioned. So basically, who is the author of the package? Is it maintained? Is it something that just came up like last week? There are 3 commits in it, and
if 3 comments, that would be sometimes even a lot.
Okay.
I think also a big part of this is for myself is also through the development process. And I'll give a recent example. You have to also manage, not just the developers, but also the designers. Is the designer, creating something that will require needlessly to add a new dependency? Or a nice example would be, datetime drop down on an input field. Today, browsers have that natively. You don't have to really add anything. Of course, if you start playing with it, and otherwise it might look more pretty, it might maybe do a little bit more functionality, but really not for the most part. So then it's on me as the CTO, for the designers, be like, don't design it like this, because that's needless extra work that we don't need, for example. And then also instilling a discipline in the developers, hey, don't include library for every stupid thing. Or if it's like this input drop down, browsers handle this natively now. Don't try to do anything fancy, just wasting your time and including packages that we don't need. So that's once you set those expectations and follow through, then it will make other things down the line much more easier.
And that's actually, maybe it's a good segue to dive into the topic of actually contributing, right? Because if I'm If we're talking about the area of how to handle development and how to guide it, we've mentioned lots of good hints for the starting from OSPOD to through looking through the licenses, through having services that are actually scanning and assessing your current libraries and the dependencies. You will have a time that you will find out any kind of defects in library, and your team or developers would like to actually contribute to that and help and fix. From this perspective, any good hints on how I should look as a CEO or CTO on this kind of effort? Should I limit that? Is it a good thing to actually let my developers to contribute to the open source?
So Google and other Silicon Valley companies are very famous of having, you can take every Friday or like 10% of your time to contribute to open source. Overall, I would say yes, it's a good effort. Of course, it kind of comes once company reaches a certain size, profitability, all that stuff. So it's sustainable through the time. But there is a lot of other things that you can do before you even get there. One of my things that really grinds my gears is that oftentimes people from companies, they don't, even if they find a bug, they don't even report it. So I think this is like, the basic response. We are getting this for free. So at least, when you find that something is not working as it should, do us all the courtesy and, make a proper report. That's like another thing, don't just say, oh, it doesn't work. No helpful, tell us under which scenario, what did you do? If you can provide reproduction. So I think this is also like a good practice to kind of teach the developers how they should also do internal reports as well.
Because contributing to open source is not only pushing code to open source repositories, right?
Yeah.
It's all of the things around it, like reporting the issues or writing like the reproduction steps to help them, to help the maintainers triage the issue and filing new ideas, some feature requests. You don't have to be the one that actually going to implement this. You could be. This is the best case scenario, but you don't have to. Like this is, you can affect if you're involved. If you're using a package heavily, you also should be involved in the development of the package. And the involvement does not mean that you need to actually push code, because if you don't have enough expertise to do it, you can help in other ways, right? So you can test new releases.
Yeah. Also, the big part, like with reporting and everything, and said, I think it really helps to better the developers for internal company issues as well. So, if I find a bug in our product, then it can be just, it doesn't work on this page. But again, that's not really helpful. You need much more information. So through that, maybe initial kind of experience in the reporting to the open source, that helps them then to produce better reports, for your products as well. And another thing is, when you start, for example, doing the reproduction, you might discover it's not the issue in the package you are using. It's actually maybe the way we are using it, or actually something completely unrelated as well. Because with reproductions, we use the minimum reproductions. You start a nice, quick, new project, in Next or something like that, whatever you use, and then try to kind of recreate the conditions of that bug.
Right. It seems that it's self-regulating system, right? We're talking about the different levels of contribution, but on the same path to fix, to improve the existing solution. How the one thinks about actually prioritizing? How does it look like that we are prioritizing this or other feature in this given solution?
Well, there might be some processes for the open source as well. Another thing is, are you actually, contributor? But let's start from it. When I, for example, as a maintainer, receive a bug report, I look, okay, do I have all the necessary information to work with this? If no, then I usually ask follow-up questions, and then based on that, trying to figure out, okay, where the issue is. How much time and energy I'm going to give to it is also determined. Okay, is this coming from somebody that's been contributing to this? Is it somebody that I know, or is it generally from somebody who is big in the community, or is it one of my sponsors? That also plays a second role. And if it comes from nobody that I see for the first time, if I look on their GitHub profile that they're not doing any contribution, then I'm not going to prioritize it as much as I would somebody who is more prominent.
Yes, so there is this street cred, right, in the open source community.
How often does it actually happen that the companies are contributing to the solutions that they are using or the dev tools that they are using?
It depends really much on the company. Of course, the more technological the company, then usually the more involved they are, the more they are aware of, I would say, their social responsibilities towards open source. Issue sometimes is with corporations or companies that really are not kind of aware of say their social responsibility, I would say, or don't want to bother. It's sometimes I would say I could call them like black companies, that they just use and don't contribute back. Sometimes not even like a bug report, or then another part can be some from culturally different nations. That European companies, American companies usually are much better at this than from other parts of the world. But I noticed, but it really depends on the culture of the company as well, where they are taking their inspiration and how much they know about open source culture, how much they are involved, and what's their models internally. But generally, my experience is that again, unless it's a very technologically involved company that has already, for example, produced their own open source or is involved in the field, it's very bad with contributions.
Right, and just to clarify on the contribution, it's if this is a foundation or it's like a already mature solution, then probably it's simple to think that it's going to foundation. There is some government, but is it so that if this is a smaller package, this famous guy from Nebraska, the contribution means that I'm actually paying you for actually your contribution there, right?
It really depends. When I mean contributions, there is of course the monetary one. That one is the easiest one to get kind of your foot into the door, get much more insight, or at the very least make sure that the guy is not going to take Chinese money or something like that and run away from the project. But sometimes the developers have a pay job, they don't want monetary contribution because they have other motivation. So being part of the discussions in the issues, so coming back to a process, okay, what are the new issues, what is the discussion of the future of the project, let's contribute in that talk. Contributing code, so adding new pull requests with new features or fixing bugs, that one very much rises your credentials to see that okay, you're contributing code, all that stuff. So those are the kinds of contributions, and of course then you can be active, for example, on Discord server to the project or whatever communication tool they use. Of course, given today how much packages you need to make an application, for example, it's probably impractical to be involved in everything. So you have to be, I would say, very selective of where you are going to put your time and money. I personally say, based on the size of your company, I also dictate. So if you're a small startup, don't worry about the big projects like React or Vue. There's tons of people, tons of big corporations, company giving money to that and managing that. Instead, find some of the smaller packages that don't get as much attention and where you yourself actually can have much more impact. So it's also maximizing benefit for yourself in that aspect. So that's one thing, and of course be involved at the very least. Even a little bit, if they have like GitHub sponsorship, helps a lot.
Yeah, what's really sad, really, is that if a large enterprise has really no issue with paying bills to, let's say, Oracle for the databases or other software for like millions of dollars, and at the same time, like sponsoring or paying for open source solutions like 100 bucks a month is basically too big of a challenge, probably due to processes that they have, right? So this is not always like a bad will over there. This is not always the issue, but rather the processes are not always compatible. So it's great that there are now more and more solutions that allow companies to contribute so financially more easily to the open source community.
In this, there have been kind of two big changer. Most recently, that's why originally open source kind of started getting into the foundation, so they can be a non-profit or something, so they can provide or kind of hook into the existing financial processes that the big corporations are used to. Then we have Open Collective and similar, where that company is a non-profit and provides kind of umbrella for other people to come together and receive those financial gifts and donations. And finally, we have most recently GitHub Sponsors, which allows individual developers to get sponsorships, and then it's part of your GitHub bill. So I think today, the excuses for not providing financial support are totally hollow, and it just means that you are not interested in that, which is can be fine. Or not everybody has to support financially, not everybody is able to support financially, but there are other things that you can do, and it's something that you should also consider in the outlook of your company. We might not be able financially to support now. We might not even be able, because of time restrictions, to do anything much more of a support or engagement at this point. But in the future, this is something that we should count on, because the benefits that then you can gain from that are tremendous.
Yeah, also very important is what you mentioned, is that there is a long tail of packages, right? So basically, there are the popular ones that actually are very fine financially speaking, the big projects, the household developer household names that you throw away. But there are lots of smaller packages that either are most likely are the hobby projects of many people that they just keep going with. And if your project depends on them, it's like you mentioned, I think it's worth to prioritize them first, look into those hidden gems that actually gives you value for your project, and it's very niche, so it's probably has a lesser chance of continuing if there is no support. So it's also in your best interest as a company to support those niche packages that you are using, because you want those people to keep going, right?
Yeah, I can give a nice example here for Litter Universe. One of the projects that I would be looking to support would be our text editor. To look into that. In this case, we've recently migrated to one that has quite a wide range of support, but we want to be involved in that. For me personally, not, but eventually, and that's like another thing I would say with management is given how long the list is, you as a CTO probably will not be able to manage all that. So sometimes it's good to have a few other developers to be able to I would say adopt part of the dependency tree and kind of be the domain experts in that. And that's why I'm looking in the future to have somebody who is going to be focused on our text editor, who is going to be helping out with the projects they're involved in it. And so that if so I can go like to him like every month, okay, what's new in the projects, what is there something that we can utilize, or be like, okay, we need this specific functionality, let's go to the people there and let's talk about it. Let's see if we can make it happen, if it fits into the project, or if we need to make a plugin aside.
Is there any kind of maybe it's a dead end street, but is there any kind of simple guideline for when I should think about using library and when I should actually write something from the scratch? If you're talking from the perspective of the entrepreneur, if you are deciding about the new feature.
For me, it's I've kind of taken this approach to fix my old habits of trying to have everything libraries. If it's kind of not to include anything new, but it's good practice to go out there, see what's out there for the problem, maybe get some inspiration and see if is this actually something that requires a lot of code. So if it's something that I can think the code of immediately, there's no need for a package. If it's something a little bit more complex, then it's a good idea to go out there. Or if maybe it can be something outside of my domain of expertise. So I go out there, see what there is, and may find, okay, it's actually pretty simple. It's just 10, 20 lines of code. I don't need a package for it. But if it's then much bigger, so I chose Strawman as the package. As I said, I had only 3 or so functions that I needed from the initial package. There was like 20 of them. But I knew that in the future, I will need more of them because Village Universe, as the name says, will be working a lot with text. So I chose that. But if I knew that I only needed like 2 functions, then I would have chosen a small library or just copied those functions themselves.
Right.
Yeah, and my approach to whether write or adopt is basically like with other. There's a general rule in IT that you should buy the commodity and build your own solution when you can have your competitive advantage over competition, and this is the same true for open source. So if there is usually no need to rewrite. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. Instead of writing your own code for some kind of like platform thing or commodity thing, you can get this from the market, buy it, or in this case, just get it because people are so nice to you that they'll deliver this solution to you for free to use. So please contribute if you can. But basically, this is the thing that you should do, and only focus your time and attention on writing the code for your product that will give you your competitive advantage, right? That could be unique. You can also release this as open source because there are also strategies in there to make your product better by releasing some open source code. But the general rule, like always, is that code is a waste. So if you can achieve your goal without writing a code, either by not approaching the problem differently or using some open source solution and quickly build on top of this, then this is always a better approach.
That's a good hint. So maybe one thing to move back to the original question, when we're talking about the contribution, one can have a picture that it's only about paying for the developer time when he's writing a code or fixing the bugs, when we are talking about open source solutions. But we know that it's not the picture, right? There is so many things, so much more that you need to manage to have a successful open source solution, right? Can we just list it for everybody? Like, what are the areas that you would consider as the time consuming, right?
There is a lot because being an open source developer, especially for smaller projects, is like similar like to being 1 or 2 people at a startup. So you wear a lot of hats. And if we just look on the development side, you have to have the idea, to do research. You have to try multiple things to figure out what's the best. If we do the implementation of the code, then you need to write documentation. Then you need to actually sell the idea out because it's open source is not winning by default. It's not always maybe the best solution, and oftentimes you might have a lot of competitors in the open source part, so you actually have to do marketing as well. And from that, then comes all the other managerial work around, managing what comes in, managing the community, all those things.
On the community, we'll probably dive deeper in a moment.
Yeah, so the thing is that it's quite easy to create an open source package, right? But it's really hard to maintain it. This is the difficult part, actually, to keep it going. And we also like guilty of this because really don't look at our GitHub repository because you'll find there like hundreds of archived repositories that used to be packages that we want to share with the world because we want to contribute back. So we open source lots of code, but we just lack the resources to maintain them properly. So
sometimes kind of really like to pick on all these packages. I did a while back a deep dive, or not a deep dive, but dive into the Meteor organizations repositories, and there are some really interesting concepts and gems, and I'm just like, my God, why haven't they developed this further? This would have been so awesome. Some of the things, actually I got developed was they had this project called Chromatic, which today, that was Aruna took the idea and built what we know today as Storybook. So there is a lot of these interesting projects lying around. So even though we might have just released it as and kind of forgot about it or didn't have the time, there's still hope, and that you might come back to it and develop it further, or maybe somebody else can come in, get inspired, and build. Or it might be the final spark that lets the flame of something completely unrelated, but it's like they see some little thing there, and it's like, Mamma mia, that is the thing I was looking for to get the final piece of puzzle in there. So even if it's not continued, then it's part of the internet history. So that's very interesting for me as well.
That's showing at least how much behind it. It seems that it's almost like running your own company. If you're a one-man army, or if you have a couple of friends, or if you have basically a group. And it will be much
customers
more.
In this case, the ones that usually not paying you, but still have some demands. So.
Exactly. So it's the worst case, right? Yeah. You are giving it for free, and you still need to react to that. And on top of that, there are those specific things that you need to have, right? It's about the legal checks that you need to make sure that your package is actually suitable for use from the legal and compliance perspective, and so much more on the community. This became a longer topic than I would actually expect. I would really like to jump into the how to build the open source, especially the aspect from your experience of building the community. But we'll need to probably split that into two sections. So just to summarize this section, we've talked about a lot of the things. We have talked about the risks. We have talked about the benefits. We've talked about the better examples of the how to use open source, and how the one CTO or CEO or startup owner could manage the open source aspect. Any kind of like 2-3 takeaways from your side for this section?
All right. I think the first thing that I kind of want to implore everybody is, CTO, CEOs, be a good, responsible citizen, you could say, and be involved with open source. Don't just take it for granted, because if you take it for granted, you might be surprised it might disappear. There, I would say, is a real threat of it, but that's for another podcast on its own.
Oh yeah.
And part of that kind of second takeaway, being ignorant of your use of open source is no longer an option, given how the field and the world situation has developed. So, monitor and be involved. And third one, there's a lot of benefits of you being involved. So don't be afraid of it.
Mm-hmm. I think I can only add to that like open source is all around us. We cannot just pretend that it's not true. So even if you're not aware that you are actually using it, you are using it. So you should dig into how your product is using open source, whether it's using properly. Maybe there be some dragons that you'll need to take care of and slay, and maybe you'll actually find some hidden gems over there that you can also contribute to and benefit from this greatly.
Mm-hmm. Good summary. From my side, probably 2 points that were the brightest from the discussion that I have captured. One is that you need to benefit. So you need to focus on the open source, because there is a huge benefit of that, either through the speed or cost reduction, and everybody is already using that. But you need to, as you have mentioned, you need to monitor the risks, and you need to use already existing solutions that can help you with that, either the standards or ICO, or actually getting to the roots of the dependencies through service providers that can help you with that. But definitely monitoring that, or having good rules inside of development teams also. And the last third point would be don't reinvent the wheel always, right? So it's not the context of having more dependencies and libraries included. Sometimes good solutions are good enough. You don't need to have a perfect one. And that's all in this episode. We'll continue in the next episode on the topics of how to build open source and community. But for this episode, that's all. Thank you, Jan, for having a great discussion here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Maciej, for contributing here. And for all of you, please share your feedback, comments on this episode, and subscribe. Do not forget to see the next episode. And you can find us on all the platforms, Spotify, YouTube. So feel free to reach us there. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.